In college, I got a degree in women's gender and sexuality studies, and I just want to read some excerpts of one of the essays that I wrote for that degree. And it talks about the ADA and how it is not actually accessible, and it means that a lot of people can still be denied disability accommodations that are relatively minor in any public space. Discrimination against people with disabilities is very much an issue in the United States, and most of it is technically still illegal. The Americans with Disabilities Act is extremely unclear and poorly enforced, allowing for accessibility laws to not be followed with little to no repercussions occurring. New and renovated buildings must be accessible in terms of parking, sidewalks, tables, ramps, and restrooms, but older buildings do not follow these same standards. Any building constructed before 1992, except for government buildings which have stricter standards, are only responsible for accessibility alterations that are readily achievable and do not require much time or money to fix. The standards for readily achievable alterations are on a case-by-case basis, allowing for many smaller buildings to slip through the cracks. From personal experience, I know that many small businesses and offices are not accessible, which limits job opportunities, and most university buildings are grandfathered into the readily achievable standard, which also just limits the classes and activities that people can take at universities. And this is a huge problem for people trying to work or receive an education, and there's nothing that is being done to solve this, unfortunately. Even for new or renovated buildings, the Department of Justice, which oversees the ADA law enforcement, has limited staff and cannot adequately enforce regulations. This means that people with disabilities are forced to advocate for themselves or file complaints, which takes a lot of time and effort on our part. I personally had to transfer from my first university because of discrimination and denied accommodations, which I was legally supposed to get, and the lawsuit process takes 4 or more years, includes many meetings with lawyers, which took a lot of time out of my already busy schedule. And when I did transfer, my lawyers decided to drop the case after years of work because I no longer lived in New York and I wanted policy changes instead of money, which is harder to sue for. Advocacy is also frowned upon, and people are made to feel greedy and unreasonable, limiting the amount of people who stand up for their legal rights. Government buildings, although held to more accessible standards, often believe they are protected by the grandfather clause, and this can also limit the accessibility of buildings for public programs, services, and facilities. This prevents people with disabilities from attending city or town government meetings, courthouses, and therefore jury duty, and any functions paid for by their tax dollars. For people without mobility issues, interpreters for deaf or hard of hearing individuals and Braille for blind individuals are often not provided, stopping them from participating in public services. Lack of options for hard of hearing or deaf individuals also applies to 911 services, hindering those individuals' safety in cases of emergency. Police can also often be an issue because people with disabilities can be unable to communicate with officers, or because people can be denied access to medications that they need to survive during police detainment. This is incredibly harmful and insulting, and there needs to be changes made to reduce discrimination and inaccessibility. Disability in itself is a social construct imposed upon us by a society making the world not accessible to us. The world has been made for able-bodied people, so the world needs to change so that we can have the same rights as everyone else. I thought this was just a really important topic that is often not touched upon by people, and a lot of people think that people with disabilities in the US have all their rights and are able to do all of the things that everyone else is able to do, and that's not the case. And even if you think about getting on disability benefits, a lot of people don't qualify, and a lot of people get denied, or it takes years and years and years times to get on those services, and at that point, once you get on, it still doesn't provide enough funds to be able to live. Unfortunately, if you have more than $3,000, or now I think they've just changed it to $5,000 in your bank account, you will get kicked off of disability. This promotes people to not be able to save anything and have to spend all of their money. And if there's an emergency with vehicles or other transportation or housing or anything else that can happen, they can't afford to pay for it, which is very unfortunate, and it's debilitating. Um, and then if people get married when they're on disabilities, a lot of times if they have um, shared bank accounts with their spouse, this can also get them kicked off of disabilities services in the country. Um, so I just thought this was something that more people need to talk about. So let me know if you have any other comments or suggestions, or if you know of any other instances that sort of highlight the inaccessibility of the US. Thanks!